Hi everyone, thank you Gaia for this introduction. Thank you also Carlo and Gaia for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here as part of the summer school on water and public space. And I'm going to talk about SUDs, Sustainable Drainage Systems. It's a tool to increase, improve resilience of urban cities, especially regarding flood risk, but maybe paradoxically also to face water scarcity. So the idea is to deal with the two sides of the same coin. So too less water, too much water. So this is the content of the presentation. We will start with a brief framework about climate change affecting urban context. Consider it as the built environment. So always taking in mind this idea of how to address droughts, floods, and all the related hazards related to climate change. We will move forward to think about urban resilience. So which type of approaches and discussions have been provided in the past years and also currently about how to be more resilient at the urban scale. So I will present two of them, so the green infrastructure and the water sensitive urban design, but there are a lot. So I will provide also some references to try to provide more information, background on these topics if you need or you are interested. So after that, I think that it's important to try to make an effort to try to provide a specific overview about nature-based solutions. So this is, sure you know, a very current approach in which we try to learn from nature, and as we will see, we have seen of the previous lecture, so how nature and green could be included in the dark on the gray side of the city. So this is the idea, to present this concept and try to understand how could be a good option to try to be more resilient. But of course, we need to move from the global scale to the local scale or the regional scale. And to do that, I think that it's important to talk about SUDs, so which are this type of mechanisms to try to be less vulnerable, more resilient, which are the main functions, and also a little information about the regulation and the costs and which type of implement this type of actions. Of course, these first 4 points are very theoretical, but we try to also provide examples. And in the point 5, we try to do that with the Spanish examples, trying to learn from their experiences. And of course, a last slide in which we can think about some remarks and how future research could improve the current role of SUDs and which type of approaches and debates, discussions could be achieved in the coming years. Of course, this list of main references. So as you know, climate change and cities nexus is mainly one of the main topics when we try to be more adapted to the impacts of climate change. So cities are hotspots, so are vulnerable to climate change, and this is because in cities we have the concentration of people and the infrastructure and all the activities, economic, social, cultural, environmental sides also related. So in this relationship, this nexus, one of the main hazards, main impacts provided by climate change or increased by climate change are related to the extreme weather events. And these extreme weather events are more or less simplified in this idea that I say before about too less or too much water. So an increase of temperatures, the droughts and heat waves related to a water scarcity process, and also a heavy precipitation of flooding, and also this type of rainfall patterns that are affecting cities, but also at the global scale. So at the same time that cities are affected by climate change, they also affect climate change because, as you know, the urban context accumulates between 70–80%, according to the different estimations, of the total CO2 emissions. So this is the relationship in which we need to make some type of actions to be less vulnerable and to increase resilience. So in this type of actions, these cities, most cities have been able to make some efforts to try to respond to this scenario. Maybe in some cases, a current scenario in which they are being affected by this type of extreme weather events, but also thinking about the future. So in this case, most of these actions have been focused on mitigation, so try to reduce CO2 emissions, and less attention has been put on adaptation, so thinking about the long-term strategies. And such and all this type of actions to be more resilient have to be thought about these long-term strategies or medium-term strategies. So here you can see some press headlines in which we can exemplify this concern about how cities could face, in this case, drought, so this increase on temperatures, but also some examples of press headlines about flood risk or flooding, river flooding risk. And in this case, according to the different simulations of the IPCC and other more regional studies, this impact of flooding will be more severe, more heavy in magnitude, and especially also in temporary variable. So this increased frequency and magnitude of extreme events like heavy precipitation and coastal storm, river flooding, will affect the urban water security. So the idea that cities are secure because they are far from this type of impacts, and this is not happen. So as you can see, some pictures on the right, and also if you remember the last episodes that we have seen across the Europe, but also in the north of Europe and the south regarding climate change more related to droughts, and on the north more related to floods. But this is the idea. So the idea that we have to make something to try to be less vulnerable to this type of events. So here, if you move more on a Europe scale, so we can see that there is not a local problem, but could be a local solution. So the idea is that in Europe and across different biogeographical regions, we can see that this type of extreme weather events regarding increase of temperatures and decrease or increase of rainfall patterns are very common across the continent. So this is a global problem, but also requires a local or regional solutions, because territory is not the same, as you know. So here we can see that globally, flood risk is one of the major hazards affecting the world. So also at a global scale, and if you can compare different decades, so the last decades of the last century and the first decades of this 21st century, there is an increase of the affection of floods in the built environment. So in the cities or in the infrastructures developed to make sense of all the services related to the cities and the urban development. But here, if we move to the last year, we can see that in 2020, we have concentrated more occurrence than the last 20 years. So this is a problem in which we think that this is not a tendency that will be stopped. So it's a very regular tendency in which this type of climate change impacts will be increased, will be affected more spaces and mainly severity. So here we can see, we will compare in this slide and in the next slide the severity of this type of impact. So I highlighted the heavy precipitation, the flooding, and the drought as the main impacts related to this binomial relationship between too less water or too much water, water scarcity or water stress. So the idea is that if we put the focus on this type of impacts, we can see that there is a medium or high worries about this type, or perceived worries about this type of impacts. And also, if we move to the future changes and regarding this unknown percentage that is very high in some regions and also in some specific impacts, we can see that there is a worry about the same type of impact. So we need to act to try to provide some type of solutions to be more protective to this type of impact. So in this case, we can think about the urban resilience, this concept that I have used from the starting of the presentation. And the idea is that cities have their unique development. So there is this nexus between people and infrastructures and built environment make some nexus in order to provide a type of development. And the sense of this type of using built infrastructure to be protected from natural hazards can create a false sense of security. So the idea that we are protected against any type and in any magnitude of impact. And this is what we think about the gray infrastructure. So this type of development in which the protection or how to be faced this type of impacts related to natural hazard have been providing some solution from the gray infrastructure. So trying to provide solutions from build something. And this idea can be have been useful in some occasions, but at the city scale, at the urban scale, and thinking about flooding, this type of gray infrastructure has not been possible to be more flexible, so to absorb the shock, the impact of, in this case, the last 2 decades of impact related to climate change. So thinking about that, this concept of urban resilience have to be dynamic, so have to be adapted to time and space in order to try to be more in line with the specific characteristics of the territory, and also has to be useful to try to revocate or to go before the starting point, before the impact of the flood, for example, the flood or the flooding risk. So in this case, we need to try to absorb the problem when the impact occurs, and also try to move again from the starting point previous to this impact. So try to recuperate this initial process in which the city or the urban environment is protected from this type of impact. So the idea is to try to combine this shock from the impact and also to try to provide a solution to fastly recover the starting situation in which the city or the urban context is not affected by the climate impact. So here the idea is that we need to integrate different sides. So we need to try to be more able to not only evaluate the problem or the impact of flooding, for example, when occurring, but we need to move forward and try to include institutional or think about institutional capacity to decide which are the main actions or measures or mechanisms that we have to apply. We need to think about the human infrastructure capacity, which is our capacity to try to put all this information together and which type of infrastructure we have in the territory. We need to think about the land use planning, so which are how these cities is conformed in their neighborhood and which the peri-urban area and so on. Of course, the superstructural capacity, this is more about how we can build or city in the last decades and which type of development can be more or less resilient to the new impacts of climate change or the increased impacts of climate change. Of course, we need to know about how a population is in this city, so which are if they are ready or not to try to achieve and face this type of impact, and also which natural or ecological solutions could be found near the city. So which type of colleagues of travel we have when we try to provide a solution to climate change. So here we can see that one of the concepts that could achieve this type of adaptive resilience or urban resilience related to climate change are the green infrastructure. This is sure one of the concepts that you know, and it's more about trying to put the green on the gray side of the city. So try to be greener and then to provide several benefits related to socio-ecological interaction. So how urban cities are developed and how greener or landscaping or water resources management could be included in this type of development, more in line with this type of protection that is not only needed from an infrastructural perspective, but also trying to move forward to try to be resilient in a whole as a citizens and as a territory. So here's some information about the term, but the most important that I think is that this idea of network. So it's not a specific action in time and space, but is also to think about the network of actions in which some few and specific actions could provide a solution at a global scale, thinking always that global scale is more a city scale or a municipality scale. It's not about the whole territory. But also there is another, and this is a concept that I selected because it's more related to water systems and maybe is more related to this type of thinking about how water for excess or for scarcity could be a solution to address climate change impacts. And this idea is try to integrate this idea of integrated water resources management. So this is an example of how this type of mechanism could be a solution, because try to put in common different needs. So make or manage water balance, so try to work with different water availability and also scarcity, water quality. There is problems on pollution in the urban systems. Water conservation should try to be very conservative in the use of potable water, and maybe to try to incorporate different non-conventional water resources like wastewater treated water, no? Or also maintain this type of water-related environmental and recreational opportunities that, in fact, as we have seen in other lectures, this need to provide a city in which the quality of life for people increase is also related to try to provide more details and more examples of greener infrastructure in the cities. So here we can see some examples of the SUDs. In this case, are more related to try to open some of the urban contexts in which water has been maybe a problem for citizens. Maybe in some cases the lack of water have provided some risk of water pollution, also more related to try to provide some pictures of which landscapes we can search and found in the cities or near the cities. For example, the constructed wetlands are more related to be on the near or peri-urban context. Anyway, we have seen that in the last 50, 70 years, this idea of trying to be more adapted at city level moves from trying to be protected from flooding episodes to, in the current scale, try to not only be able to provide a solution for flood mitigation, but also to provide recreation and aesthetics, landscaping, ensure that water quality standards are on and water pollution is addressed. Also try to restore the flow regime in the urban flow corridors, and also provide ecology in the receiving water. So this quality related to the water quality standards and the ecosystem services related to water in urban system, but also try to include the stormwater as a resource of the water cycle system. And also, of course, this the last point, and is not the last one, because resilience to be more adapted to this microclimate that could affect a urban or a region in a specific terms. So to address this pass of time and pass of concepts in which we need to address in a more integrated and whole picture of water cycle in the urban space, there is, as you can see on the right, different concepts, different methods and approaches that have been provided in the last decades. We have seen a couple of that, but the idea is that each of them could be more or less adapted to each territory. So it's important to be more conscious about which type of territory, which type of needs we have at a urban level, which is the thinking about that for citizens who live and who can be affected by climate change impacts. So this is more about not only a solution, a technical solution, but a social solution in which this coexistence between social and ecological infrastructures should be in common. So in this line, to try to learn from the nature and include this knowledge in the urban systems regarding water solutions, the concept of nature-based solutions is more about trying to provide this type of mechanisms to protect and to increase sustainability in the city context. So this is more about trying to increase the benefits of be part of the system, of the natural system, that against the system. So a lot of strategies that we need to achieve from this protection, from trying to include infrastructure, of course, but that this infrastructure is adapted to natural systems, how these systems should be managed, and which are the need to restore the system when the climate change impact affect the system, and try to reduce the resilience of the system. So here you can see some examples of NBS. Most of them are related to try to put this green face on the city context, but taking into account, considering that the benefits at socio-ecological level should be achieved. It's not only to protect about climate change impacts, but also to provide a picture landscaping in which a society is comfortable, is using this space. It's all. So the idea is that we need to be in contact with nature, also when nature protect us against this type of conflicts or impacts from climate change. And here there are some tables. I will move very fast because it is just to compare these strategies. So the NBS strategies and the gray strategies, the strategies used in the built environment to be protected against climate change. So the idea is that there are is to face the same impacts, but in a different way. It's not just new, it's just to think differently to provide a solution that could be better. So just to have this type of comparison, and also to try to identify that impacts of each impacts are not the same regarding each effect of climate change. So maybe impacts could be more social, but could be more ecological, or could be more technical. So the idea is that to provide some strategies to be more resilient. This is the goal of this type of comparison. And again, in this case, to address, for example, the drought system, which are the main strategies from NBS that could be achieved in order to be resilient, but also to increase the benefits of this nexus between water, public spaces in urban context. So here we can see also this evolution in the framework and approaches to think about how technological development and how environmental knowledge could be in line with trying to be more effective when facing climate change impacts, thinking about flooding, or thinking about drought, or thinking about any type of risk that could be dangerous for a city and the urban context. So in this case, we can see how we can move from the water supply city, in which the focus is try to supply water for citizens and all the activities related to their function, but also the last point is try to think about urban blue-green. So this idea, or put together blue of water and green of nature in the urban system. And this is very systematic, because it's not only to think about provide a solution for a specific problem, it's try to provide different solutions for different problems, and this system should run. It's not possible to provide some solution that could be not benefit for another one. So this is the idea of thinking about expand the role of this type of mechanism of NBS to try to provide a whole solution, an integrated solution. And on the right, you can see this type of problems in which cities have to address. So the idea is to how NBS could provide some solutions for each of these type of problems. And this is the idea of integrate different approaches. So here is where the SUDs at a local scale could be an example of NBS. There is some different names of sustainable drainage systems is the most common one, but sustainable urban drainage system in the Europe, for example, or low impact development LED in the US. But we are talking about the same. So here's the idea is try to provide common technologies, so different technologies and techniques used to drain water, water from the storm, water from these flooding episodes, in a manner that could be used for another solution. So try to provide this unconventional water resource in the system, in the water cycle system. So they are based on this philosophy of trying to close the natural and the predevelopment of drainage from a site. So try to think about water always as a resource, include when this water could be from a flooding process. And all these elements, thinking about urban, hydraulic, and landscaping, have to be in common. So have to be able to capture water, distribute water, and also use water for another type of uses. Always in thinking about the whole cycle of the natural resources. And here is, I think it's a very clear picture about what do we think or what we have to understand about SUDs, because this is the idea of the sponge city, is the idea that we need to move from a more linear pattern, in which we can see on the conventional pattern, to a more cycle pattern. So this top down, in which the city have to capture water, but also have to provide other type of actions in order to make more retention, storage, purify, and all the systems related to all the cycle related to water systems. This is the idea of try to have this protection area in which water is itself the resource, but also is the solution. And here some SUDs and also bio-SUDs is the idea of try to include this more sustainable approach. These are simple examples in which we can see how from the project to the result, and are more based on peri-urban areas. It's not on the core of the city. It's more related to those areas near to the rivers that have some type of prevention action before the risk or the flood risk happens. And here just a simple two couple of slides about the cost-benefit analysis. It's not my topic, and the idea is that just to think about, and this frame has impacted me, because it's the idea that there is a lot of work in the preliminary stage of thinking about how SUDs or why SUDs should be promoted in a territory, in a city, than the implementation or the maintenance phase. So this idea of thinking about the project and thinking about all the issues, all the items that have to be addressed, including, for example, as you can see on the red frame, this site survey. So try to think and ask to people and ask to managers which is the perception of this type of projects, because this type of analysis of perception and how people are more or less resilient to climate change and which type of actions could be addressed in order to be less vulnerable needs to be included in the proposal of this type of projects, because one of the functions, as you know, is to try to provide landscaping and green spaces. And if people don't see these spaces as their own way, their own picture of how city wants to be, it's very difficult to try to justify this type of projects. And this is also another type of representation of this idea, but in this case, it's more about which are the characteristics of the flood process. So which are the level of impact and the type of impact that this city or this urban context could achieve, and which are the main direct and indirect property uses. So which are the benefits related to the costs to implement and to maintenance this type of process. But the idea is that we need to know very, very well which type of risk we have to achieve and we have to face in order to put in balance this cost benefit. And also here we start with the second part of the presentation, is more practical. So the idea is that to put some examples and make some visual ideas about which type of actions could be exemplified as a SUDs. In this case, the first one from Alicante. This is 10 years ago created in the neighborhood of San Gabriel. This is near the whole city, the core city, sorry. And the objective is dual, so is try to retain the first runoff water generated for the urban city. So it's the idea to include this wastewater cycle, but also to try to avoid this discharge of water in the coastal line in order to be used for the BPTP, the wastewater treatment plant, for possible water reuse for non-potable activities. And also, this is another from Alicante. This is the La Marjal, is the flowable urban park. This is a very how to say, perceived benefit of this type of action, because it's very used for people, for education, and also for learning about landscaping. And in this case, the idea is to put together a triple function. So the hydraulic, so the idea is to temporarily accumulate rainwater in case of flooding risk, but also it's social because it's a public park, so it's municipal, and also environmental. So this is a green lung for the biodiversity. So the idea is that to put these three functions in the same place, in the same time, but maybe being differently perceived by people, because most of the people that visit this space doesn't know about the hydraulic function, but in fact there is this, and this is this should be promoted. The third case of Alicante is a municipality near to the city. In this case, is more recent. In this, the idea was to provide a wetland, a constructed wetland, in fact, plus storing and reducing water captured from the flooding risk to try to be used by the BBTP of the city. And in this case, it's more about trying to provide a recreational and ornamental use, because in fact, this type of natural park or urban park is more about try to use water differently. So use water for irrigation of the green areas, for the firefighting network supply, and also for street watching. So in this case, it's more a recreational activity, but the main value at the water cycle scale is try to take profit of all this water for different unconventional uses. And here we move to Madrid. In this case, is a stormwater storage tank. Is the largest facility of this type in Europe, at least until 2020. Is about 10 years old, and this is the idea is that this is not seen from outside. So the main impact when you are on is clear, but when you are out, it's difficult to see which is the function of this type of activity or action. Here is also a flowable urban park in Santander. In this case, the recreational activities is very clear, but in fact, this moves from an agricultural use before their experimental different types of actions. In this case, is artificial wetland or a constructed wetland, is a pond, and is also an experimental parking where different typologies of different actions are monitored. So the idea is try to provide a green bulb, but also try to be less affected by this flooding risk. Here also in the north of the country, as you may know, Vitoria-Gasteiz was recognized as European Green Capital in 2012. And since then, in fact, is the final step of a decade of actions in which a green urban infrastructure system has been created. And SUDs are one of the main actions to be carried out. In this case, most of the actions are based on rethink about the urban main streets in which are this type of cycling and recreational and trying to provide a public space in which green dominates the scene. But in this case also, it's the idea to improve sanitation, in this case, trying to avoid some problems of flooding and related to an exit of water, but also to try to recover this functionality at hydrological level and ecological level. So this is more or less how this type of city has been developed in the last decade, in the last 15 years, in fact, in which green is part of the city. And also here is a different perspective. So here is not about one action with more or less extension. It's more to thinking about a combination of measures, of mechanisms, in 5-in-1 in this case, in order to try to be more resilient as a whole, not as in a point of the city or in a part of the city. So in this case, different mechanisms has been promoted in 5 years of time more or less, in a detention infiltration zone, in a permeable pavement, of a parking, rainwater harvesting system, these infiltration areas used as a park, as a urban park, and also trying to provide vegetated roof and system for the use of rainwater in the social center. So the idea is to not always one action is needed, maybe some different combined actions, and always thinking about the needs of the territory to try to apply the best options to be really adapted to climate change. And the last one example is in Barcelona. In this case, is a public park, and the idea is to try to replicate the role of a river, a water course in which this water space is located with some landscaping and urban and picnic areas. But the idea is to collect water when an episode of flooding is about, and we need to collect this water to try to provide another use after the impact occurs. So here, as main remarks and maybe future research, that is that firstly, maybe you know, but there is this Adaptation portal, this Adaptation site, a website that is very interesting, in which you can see some of the examples of actions carried out in different cities across Europe, and there are a lot of details about how this type of projects can be achieved and which type of requirements you need to think about and try to search for the best option to be adapted really at the need of the city. And also some priority research questions in which we need to think about if SUDs are the best option, for example, or at what level SUDs are transferable. So what is running in one place could be replicated directly in another, or we need to make some changes and study a lot about which type of risk and which type of nature of the city we are working on. Also, if there is the possibility to try to address different types in a multiple hazard in a simultaneously way. So which are the benefits of this type of green infrastructure, of this type of nature-based solution, and also which is the capacity of SUDs to try to reduce this impact. So we can specify in numbers or in some type of the results, which is the benefit after a hazard occurs, a disaster occurs, in order to put this in value and try to reflect about which are the main benefits or added value of this type of action. So we have to address, report which are the benefits once these type of actions have been carried out. And of course, we try to put in the balance the cost and the benefits of this type of actions. Most of the examples that we have provided are public. So this is also an investment that need to be think about when we try to provide more public expensive actions, or which are the priorities at municipal level or at local or regional level, and if adaptation to climate change is a priority, or maybe is a secondary action that there are other priorities maybe at short term that we need to face. So just to close this, the presentation is more about a list of basic information and reference in form of published papers, and maybe if you are interested in some of these type of solutions or examples, you can see here more of them. And that's all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sandra. It was really very interesting, very full of information, and fortunately we recorded, so probably we can pass slide one by one, but thank you to be complete in your presentation. I mean, I think there were no part that we could miss, and so we can have time to read carefully, because you gave us a lot of elements which think about public spaces and even the role of architecture. I mean, in Italy, we have a lot of discussion about the pool for, I don't know, this is the name I give it, it's not the right name, the pool to capture the water before the water could affect the cities. And nobody wants this. Because of course they change the aspect of the spaces, the environment, and so on. But we know that we can make a new kind of landscape. No, that can be a very good opportunity to have to know how to use the water. This is in our historical experience. No, for example, my land, the Po Valley, it was in the past a very important action of engineering. You understand how to manage the water. And now it seems only a technical aspect, but it's not only a technical aspect. So if we put together your lecture and the lecture we had before of West State, we understand that we could put it together the landscape as a possibility to work. Of course, in the urban environment, this is more complicated. In the metropolis, it's not so easy to act in this way, but this is the challenge that we have, and this is why we are discussing. So I think you gave us a lot of information, a lot of possibility even for design, and we understand that now, for example, the problem of the floods is not only the problem of the floods, but it's something that's very complicated and from which we can have a lot of possibilities. So I ask if students have some questions to you. So again, if you want to write in the chat or raise the hand on Zoom, it's the same. So I know it is very complicated because we have to get a lot of information, but please so give time to them. Okay, so Mariana, can you take the? Okay, can you do?
Sure. Hi, Sandra. Thank you so much for the lecture. It was very comprehensive. I really appreciate it because I'm on my research right now. I have all these questions you highlighted about because I'm working with SUDs, but also nature-based solutions. And to me, a question is like something I'm curious to know about. In your view, is the main challenges for implementation of nature-based solutions in cities? So thinking about cities in special, like what do you see are if you could highlight like the main challenges for implementation? Yeah.
Thank you for your words and for the question. I think that maybe from my background in which these socio-ecological systems need to be addressed in an integrated way or a more comprehensive way, I think that the social part of the NBS or the SUDs need to be addressed. So the idea is that for the works that I have the opportunity to read and to experiences in which I can more or less follow from directly or from colleagues, technically this type of approaches are very well developed. So there is a lot of knowledge, a technological way in which it's easy to understand which is the problem and which is the solution from a technological way. But the idea to how after this process more technological or more technique is addressed is right on the paper, is placed on a drive. The idea is that how social aspects, how a neighborhood could be more or less affected by this type of interventions. So what Carlos said, that there are implications at visually at the landscape effect that maybe some neighbor could be not in line with their picture of their near more or less environment, and is a benefit for the whole, but maybe could be not a benefit at individual level, or maybe could be how to say, difficult to live with this type of infrastructures. At least this type of infrastructures are not well developed or are not well appreciated by the people. So I think that when an activity with this type of SUDs or another type of actions that in which we try to put green, put a water cycle, visually and for people, it's difficult to know if this type of action will be accepted or not if we don't ask to people. We don't make some type of participation process in which the neighborhood that will be affected by this type of action could check which are the pros and cons and which are the benefits for the community and the confrontation for the individual level or for the street, maybe, because most of these actions could affect different streets, quarters, but not a lot of a neighborhood. And I think that this is the idea. Maybe for my background, it is more social or trying to understand this connection between society and the nature. But the idea that to try to put the green and the blue in the city, that it seems like more gray, I think that it's good because it's not as the past lectures say, the idea that we live a lot and we live in cities. We are urban citizens. The world is urban citizens, but the idea is that we need to make these places more comfortable for day by day. And maybe this type of actions in which society could be more involved and understand which type of function, because for example, the example of the Marjal in Alicante, people only see the landscape and the park and the ducks and all the species living on, but the function of the hydraulic function is not seen. And also it's not really, how to say, really published or expressed by the managers or the policies that carry out this type of action, because maybe people are not very confident in trying to have stormwater collected before their legs. So I think that this type of interaction between which is the function of the SUDs or the other type of green infrastructure, then NBS, and these functions are or not in line with the picture of the citizens when thinking about their urban context. If this could be merged, this combined, I think that are perfect solutions because are costly effective. And the idea is that the maintenance, as we can see on the frame shown before, the maintenance and the development is more about trying to think about preliminary aspects in which this type of actions could not be comprehended, could be not understood, could be not justified as individuals or our communities. And I think that this could be, but maybe from a technological point of view, another colleague could say that there are a lot to invest and research on that. But I think that for examples that I can see that the technological aspects are very well done. And I think that more or less the social aspect and how these type of infrastructures could be justified by the society. I think that it's a very, because as I said, most of these projects are public. So public investment has to be also justified from a social point of view. I think it's the base of this type of action. So more or less is this. Maybe I don't know if I can answer well the question.
No, thank you. Very good point. Thank you. Yes.
Thanks to you.
And Liang Zhu, do you want to make your, okay? Are you connected?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for your lecture, Sandra. My question is, you mentioned the ability to improve humans' well-being from NBS, right? So in which aspect will improve people's physical or mental health during your practice? Thank you very much.
Thank you to you, Liang. Well, the idea that some studies, not from a geographical point of view, because it's geographers maybe learn from different aspects, but are not my topic, but from a sociological colleagues, this idea of put the green and the blue in the gray of the urban cities is very well perceived by the citizens. So the idea that cities should be more comfortable, also thinking about mobility, no? But not only in mobility, but most of the attention has been put on the past years on mobility and try to open streets to more sustainable actions. And but when we think about the public space, when this public space include water, for example, there are studies in which the perception of this, the use, the perception, and the justification of the maintenance of this and promotion of this type of public spaces in which water is one of the elements to take into account are very well perceived. So the idea is that water provides some type of, I don't know, mental health, but the sensation and the sensitivity of that urban context could be more comfortable if water exists in a near neighborhood and near places in which people move on and try to exchange experiences. So this is maybe more a perception perspective. And the physical perspective, I think that maybe it's more about how this type of actions could be used to try to provide a more healthy life. So the idea that if we have some spaces in which you can move on, all the day is open, and there are some basic elements in which you are comfortable because you don't know cars or time of this type of processes in which you are thinking about how to be protected from or against some risk. In this case, you have some spaces in which you are the protagonist. You have the role to stay there and try to provide some type of exchanges of experiences and so on. And maybe, for example, in the educational level, most of these spaces are used to learn and to provide some information, some background to children, to students for different stage in which most of these functions could be shared. So the idea is that these public spaces should be also a part of the learning process in which a city is developed, is learning from itself. And one of the main issues in which this type of information could be useful is that when these citizens, or in this case, when these children grow up and try to provide their visual picture of the city, when they have been able to remember this type of spaces in which water is near, water is not a problem, is a solution, because maybe they can play with water or play or sounds, the sound of water, which is very provides relax. This type of memories also is a picture in which some of the quality of life that also the previous lectures say is very important. So I think that is part of the imaginary in which all of us grow, and when you have some examples of places in which you are comfortable, you are sensitive, and you see that nature could be a colleague to try to face with problems, I think that it's better for this relationship between social and natural aspects. So integrate this type of solutions in a urban space in which flood could be a problem, but these spaces could be the solution. I think that it's easy to understand which is the cost benefit. So maybe it's not more about mental health, but this type of perception that you think about something that is useful, is better for your life, provides you some type of feedback, a positive feedback. I think that it's a way to improve this feedback from the social side of the SUDs or the GI or the MBS. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Thank you for your answer, Professor.
Anya, if you want to put your question.
Yeah, thank you for your lecture, and I would like to know, are there any approaches to the maintenance of such natural-based systems? Should there be some authority or organization, some special one, who would be responsible for keeping it working in time? In some example, I'm from Kiev, and for our landscapes, just general public services are responsible, and they just don't know what to do with some kind of ecological solutions. And how does it work in Spain in that?
Thank you, Anna, for your question. It's a very interesting question, because it's true that when I put this picture of this of the framework in which I say there are a lot of information and a lot of previous or preliminary work in thinking about the process and how to build these suits, but it's true that the maintenance is important. In fact, because most of these projects, for example, in Spain, as you have seen, the ancient one is I think that 2008, and is a fruit urban park, and there is not a lot of time in which we have seen that a maintenance is needed. So nowadays we only see not the original one, but we see that this type of actions are more or less as they have been think about and they have been applied, and we don't see the costs, and we don't see the consequences of the use of this type of SUDs, of actions. But for example, in Spain, as most of these examples are at municipality level, the responsible is the water supply system, the service in which because it has to be clear that when the SUDs have this type of recovery of a water cycle, so there is a wastewater treatment plant, for example, in which water from flooding is recovered and is included and introduced again to the system, the main action to be carried out is a technical action, because there is more about the integrated water management system. But at policy level, the municipality is the owner of the infrastructure, because it's a public space. And in this case, the maintenance is only thought about the technical aspects, so that water could achieve the different functions when it's collected and when it's distributed and when it's included in the system or reintroduced in the system. But for example, in those SUDs where there is this landscaping and the urban parks, this is not a technical aspect. It's more like that municipalities have to provide some landscape services in which the municipality services that are covering the green areas of the city should achieve minimum actions to address this type of visual affection of these actions. But in fact, there is not an organism almost in Spain, a global or a whole institution in which there is some type of guide to try to know how we can proceed when, for example, the SUDs are more than 10 years old, or which are the main technical problems in which SUDs should be addressed when they pass 10, 20 or 30 years. It's also true that each event, when a natural hazard, when a flooding occurs, there is some type of discussion about the effects of the flood in the system, for example, and how the system has response to this type of impact. But it's just a technical way. So it's just to see if there is some type of management of the installations and so on. But it's not a discussion about if these SUDs are working or not a lot, or if could be work better than they have. For example, this is one of the points that the top 5 points that I provided in the last slide, in the sense that is true that this type of systems are working, and we can see, because we can compare the impact of different flooding processes in 5 or 6 years, and we can see that the existence of this SUD or the inexistence of the SUD change a lot, the impact in the city, but we only can compare be or not be, but we do not compare other ways to be of these SUDs. So this is the idea. So when the SUD is working, which improvements could be added in order to check if this SUD is providing the 100% of their functions or only the 90%, and maybe the 90% is well, but 100 could be better. So this is the maintenance, or the type of discussions that in maintenance could be included. But for my understanding, I think that a non-unique institution to think about that is carry on, and also it depends of each SUD's concept and each SUD's territory and how municipalities are managing and the water supply system is managing this type of actions. Maybe for this, because it's new in the concept, and application. Maybe in 10 years, we will see that some type of debates or discussions are coming. But for now, almost in Spain is very, well, this type of examples. There are not a lot of examples. So these 7, 8 examples I put here, maybe there are five or six that are in process, so are SUDs that are in process, but there are not a lot. So maybe we need more experiences in order to provide this umbrella of this question in which we can check if the maintenance is carried out, which type of maintenance and which type of investment, for example, or new actions we take to take. Thank you so much, Anna, for the question.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, me too, I have a question. And okay, I wanted to ask you if there's like any kind of research on the possibility to use different kinds of SUDs, because there are the different strategies, like an acupuncture SUDs strategies around the city. So taking one city and filling all the city with different kind of SUDs. Is there any research on that? And also the question is if is really more expensive, this kind of strategy, rather than using normal pipe system, or?
Thank you, Gaia, for the question. Well, the example that I put here, the 5-in-1 in Valencia, is not a big city, it's just more a village, but it's a city, but it's not about 10,000 inhabitants. But the idea is that this idea of put together different actions, thinking about the whole system, or for example, the strategy that the Vitoria-Gasteiz city has made in the last decade. So the idea is to think about the city as a whole. So if you have the opportunity to think about the city, and this depends on the city, of the type of the city, of course, but if you have a city in which you can identify different points in which, in case of flooding risk, could be affected or could be managed in order to reduce the risk, I think that it's better, of course, because you work as a network. But there are some aspects, for example, in Alicante, some of the La Marjal, for example, is a case in which it should be done in this place because there is a river near of this place in which all the water comes on. So the idea is that if you have a city in which there is not a river near to the city, or inside the city, but you have a river in the peri-urban area, so in the near, you maybe could provide this type of actions, big actions, and very located actions. But if you think about to be more resilient as a city concept, I think that fewer but more common actions need to be applied, because the idea, for example, of Vitoria is to see green in each street. So the idea is that to have this visual picture in which green is the new gray. And if you don't see this, well, you can see a stormwater, you can see a flood river, a flood urban park, but you only see the flood river park, or you only see the stormwater, but you don't see the city as a whole. And I think that when people move in those cities in which movement is walking, for example, so you open cities in which you have the ability to move from one place to another by walking. If you see green in green, not only trees, but the idea that you put different strategies as we have seen in some of the examples, I think that this is the idea of trying to be more adapted or learn more about these nature-based solutions, because the nature is a whole, is not actions in which you can see disconnected from the whole. But of course, it depends, I think, of the city. So if you have a river inside the city, so crossing the middle of the city, you have to take some type of actions that are very, very clear on trying to reduce this risk. But if you have, after that, you have another city, or in the same city, but you have another place in the city in which you can introduce this type of actions at local scale, very few, but maybe I think that it's the best. Of course, this type of actions are Well, I was to say that are expensive, but in fact, all is expensive in the sense that any action is costly. So the idea is how we put in balance the cost and the benefits, as we have seen in the previous slide. So I think that, well, it's difficult to try to have only just one model. So I think about SUDs or the green infrastructure or the MBS have to be in this line, because the useful of the nature, if we learn from the nature, we need to understand that each territory needs different solutions. The objective, the aim, the goal could be the same, but the way the street or the road that we need to follow could be different. And if this road is not adapted to the aims of the project related to the territory, it's very difficult, I think, to try to found or to have the same solution. So, well, I don't know if I merge the two questions or if something that I don't question, but just.